Hey, it's Cameron, and in this video, I'm going to be going through how I went from a broke university student and a kid to working at Apple and Amazon as an engineer on six figures of income a year at 23 years old. Now, I'm going to be taking you on this journey of mine over the past 5, 6, or 7 years to be able to actually do what I've done. Now, hopefully, in this video, there'll be a lot of kind of snippets, a lot of pieces of information that you'll be able to extract and actually apply to your own life to be able to get ahead a whole lot quicker than how much it took me as well. So, what we'll do is we'll go step by step through it. So, the first thing is I started having a bit of an interest in cybersecurity at 16 years old. And I've got a really good fond story of how I actually got into cybersecurity and had this passion develop over time. So at 15 years old, well, yeah, 15, 16 years old, I, was just, I was bottom of the class. I was just messing around. I was a class clown, nothing kind of special. I wasn't naturally smart, anything like that. Just messing about and then going home and playing video games or hanging out with my friends or whatever, right? Now, I had this one friend in uh, secondary school, right? And we was pretty close, right? Like I would go around his house, we'd play games and that kind of stuff. Around the ages of 15, 16, he started showing me some stuff about tech, right? And I won't get into the specifics in terms of the niche kind of stuff, right? Obviously my niche is cybersecurity. I won't try to be too technical in terms of that, just so you can still get as much value out of this as possible if you're in a different niche. But he showed me what is known as Kali Linux is, a Linux operating system essentially. Now, this was my first time at 16 even seeing what this was, and I just didn't understand it. So I was asking him questions. He had it on a live USB, and he would boot it up in the school computers at lunchtime, and he would kind of walk me through the tools and how they work. I was very fond of the terminal. I never saw that before, apart from command prompt in Windows, which is kind of nothing compared to the Linux terminal. So I was very interested in that. So yeah, he used to teach me a little bit about it, showed me like some tools inside Linux and that kind of stuff. Now, it wasn't a huge amount. Obviously, I was 16, I knew absolutely nothing, but this actually served as building up my passion to start with. And it got to a point where I would be in my lessons and I'd be thinking, oh, it's lunch next. I'm actually going to go and find this friend and go and learn more Linux with him. Like just mess around with it, play around, like nothing bad, just kind of checking it out, that kind of stuff, the tools. And it started developing my passion over time. And bearing in mind, like this was me at 15, 16 years old. Now, well, technically this was 15, right? Because I remember something. And essentially, when I was 15, it was coming up to my birthday. And he asked what I wanted for my birthday, and I didn't know what to tell him, right? Most people are like, video games, new clothes, whatever. I already asked my parents for that, so that was basically ticked off, and I had no idea. So he was like, okay, well, just think about it and just let me know when you have an idea. So I went home that night and I thought about it, and I, went through a few different options, and then I came across one which was really interesting, and it was a Linux operating system on a live USB. And essentially, what that means is you have a USB dongle, a USB stick. It's got an operating system on it, and you can actually boot into it when you restart a computer. So, for example, let's say you have Windows or Mac right now. If you use this live USB that has, let's say, Linux on it, you'll be able to boot into the operating system of Linux and not actually use Windows or Mac operating system. So, it's basically a way of actually using Linux. So, I was like, well, yeah, I'll ask him for that. So I asked him for that, and he didn't really say much. So I just thought, whatever. But then my birthday came around, and he gave it to me, and I was just non-stop using it all of the time, right? So that was how I actually got started in cybersecurity at about 15, 16 years old, just kind of playing around with stuff, not really understanding anything. So that was my first kind of gateway into tech. Now from there, I then turned 17 and then therefore went to 18, as you naturally do. And I was doing A levels, right? I was doing physics, computer science, and IT. All of it was not relating to my niche, which was cybersecurity. It was just more or less like basic like stuff, where it was like advanced physics, mathematics, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't about my passion, right? My passion was cybersecurity. That was my niche that I wanted to go into. So I would study my subjects during the day. I would then come home and learn as much as possible about my tech niche that I wish to go into, cybersecurity. I would learn the tools, I would watch videos, I would watch vlogs about day in the lives. I would do all of this kind of stuff. And I did this for about 2 years straight, just learning as much as possible, 12-hour days, every single night, learning something got to do with it. Because I enjoyed it. It didn't feel like work to me. I enjoyed it. Now, this was actually quite interesting because this and having this knowledge led me into my first internship at 17 years old. So this was only about a year or two after I even first started having the passion. So I was a cybersecurity consultant intern, and it was at a company called F Secure. And it's kind of like Norton. I think a lot of people know what Norton is. It's an alternative and competitor to that. And I landed this as an offer when I was 17, but then when I started it, I was 18. So I did that for about 4 months, 4 months, before going off to university. Now, I learned a whole bunch in that. It was my first exposure in the industry of actually working in a tech job, because previously I was a waiter, I worked in a warehouse, I worked in retail as well, and all of them were pretty horrendous. I didn't like it at all. So it was a really nice change for that. Now, once I did that internship, I went off to university and I was studying computer science in university, and it was a 3 year program. So essentially, what I was doing was the same thing as A levels, but there was a slight difference here. So when I did A levels, I was studying my technical skill set development for about 2 years to get a really good amount there. So I know my stuff. And that led me into my first internship. When I went to university, and this was something that was subconscious, I think I just naturally picked this up instead. But I would do university work just like how I did A levels. But instead, in my evenings and my spare time, I wouldn't do technical skill set development that much. I would focus on marketing. And this is something that I discovered instead, right? Because marketing is going to be how we are being perceived by companies as a candidate for our ideal positions that we want to have. So, therefore, if we don't show ourselves in the right way, no matter how good our technical skill set is, we're simply never going to get given the offer. So I decided to pivot. Now that I have that good technical knowledge, I was learning it a bit on the side, maybe 20%, but 80% of my effort, or let's say 60%, was going towards marketing. And then the final 20% was going towards my university degree. And I did this consistently for those 3 years. Alongside that, I also got things like certifications. I got published research as well. So I got 3 industry certifications for cybersecurity. I got published research of cybersecurity from my university as well. It was like a whole like position that I had. I was a research assistant essentially. And then of course I got my dissertation, which I guess is research. I don't even know. And then of course my grade as well. But we're kind of skipping ahead a bit. So let's go back, right? Second year of university, I had nothing planned up for the summer. Okay. So I was going into my second year. I had nothing ready for the second year for my summer, right? Apart from obviously my studies, but then they finished for the summer, and then I got that like 3 to 4 month gap. So I thought, you know what? I did an internship, back before I started uni. I didn't do anything for first year summer. Let's try to get a second internship for second summer. So I started applying a little bit. It wasn't a lot. I probably applied to like 10 positions or something like that. But one of them, right, was Apple. Now, I remember this distinctly of when I applied. I was in a digital forensics on disc lecture, which essentially is going to be looking through a computer, kind of like what police do. Like they go through like forensics and of like your digital devices, that kind of stuff. I was learning that. I was in the lecture, I was on my laptop, browsing the internet, browsing some jobs on LinkedIn. I came across this Apple security internship position, which is, of course, my niche. So I thought, okay, well, let's look at the job description. Let's see if it makes sense. Let's see if it aligns with what I'm looking for. And it did to a substantial amount. So I decided, you know what? Let's just apply. I put in an application, and that was basically it. I just went back on with my lecture, making some notes. 1 week went by, 2 weeks went by, 3 weeks went by, 1 month went by, 2 months went by, 3 months went by, and still I heard nothing back. Now, by this point, I completely even forgot I applied because it just took so long to ever hear something back. I thought I got ghosted or something, right? Because, of course, this is Apple we're talking about. And obviously, it's a massive conglomerate company. So they probably have loads of candidates, most likely just going to, go some potentially. That was my thought process. And then one day I wake up and I have congratulations, we're putting you forward for an interview with Apple. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, that's crazy, right? And bearing in mind, I was like 20 at this time. I wasn't old, I wasn't well versed. I had like less than 6 months worth of experience. I was still with my degree, for God's sake, right? So it really threw me off guard. And I just didn't know how to kind of process that, right? So it took a few days, and then I got back to them and I said, "Yeah, here's what the dates when I'm free. Let me know when works best for you." So I had the interviews scheduled, and I also had some other stuff scheduled as well. I had a return offer for an internship at F-Secure, which is the one that I originally had my first internship at. I also had a full-time position ready to go and available as well. And that was for a pen tester, which is essentially a cybersecurity consultant, essentially. And then, of course, this Apple one that now came through. So I basically scheduled those interviews with Apple. I went through stage one, and they were like, "Yep, good." I think it was like a behavioral or something like that. So just like, tell me a time when type of questions. So I went through that, answered that. They loved that. So I was put forward for a technical interview. Now, the technical interview, it was one on one, right? It wasn't live, it wasn't an OA or anything like that. It was me with an interviewer who works at Apple. So they were asking me some technical questions, right? And this was why it was so important for me to get those 2 years in initially, where I did technical skill set development at the start, because I could then rely on that knowledge that I did even, 2 years back, 3 years back, because that was still strong in my mind. And since then, I was then focusing on marketing, right? Marketing myself as a candidate. So I can land these interviews, can land these offers. So when I was asking those technical interview questions, I was answering them based on the knowledge that I had at that point in time, which was based on the ratio, so 20% technical learning at this point in time, but also, of course, those 2 years of technical learning I did as well. And then, yeah, they seemed to like that. So I got put forward for a second round. I did the second round. They liked that as well. And by this point, I was basically getting the offer from the other one as well, for the pen testing one. So I let Apple know about that, and they then kind of fast tracked the process a bit further as well. So I got to the final stage a bit faster than the other candidates, and essentially that was a technical as well, but it was more so just like general tech questions and also about my niche as well. So I answered those. Of course, they were technical. Some were pretty difficult, but I still performed well. And then I got given the offer. The offer came back, and it was an email offer. And I actually landed the Apple Information Security internship position. Now, bearing in mind, there was about 200 to 300 candidates who applied for this position. People who had masters, PhDs, 5 to 10 years worth of experience, all sorts, right? And you're probably thinking, like, why would 10 years of experience candidates apply for an internship? And the reason for that is because it was Apple, right? And their logic and their thought process was, well, although I've got 10 years experience, if I get an internship and I can get a full-time role after that, I'm now in FANG, and now I'm on six figures and, forever. So that was why. But there was about 200 to 300 candidates who applied, and there was two positions available. I got it, and someone else got it as well that I work closely with. Now, that was about, I think it was a less than 2% success rate in terms of that. So purely technical skill sets alone were not enough. I had to learn something else, which was, of course, the marketing that I've been mentioning for quite some time now, and also in this video. Now, that actually led me into that position, right? So I did the internship. I worked on some really incredible projects with some really interesting people who are very intelligent and smart. And what happened was I then went back to university for my final year of study to get my degree. And I was waiting for about 4 months after it finished, 3 or 4 months, to hear back if I got the graduate position. Now, by this point in time, I had no idea if I had it. I had genuinely not a clue. And they said that they were very selective with giving them out. This was the first year that they ever did an internship in the UK for information security. So they're not too sure how it's going to work. So I was like kind of worried a little bit, right? But I also kind of was like, well, I've got an internship there. Hopefully I can get some experience somewhere else. And then, yeah, I got a phone call randomly from an unknown number, and they're like, "Is this Cameron?" I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, this is the recruiter from Apple. Yeah, we wanted to say, yeah, we're going to give you the graduate offer." So I was absolutely ecstatic, and I just didn't know what to say. I think I was just like, that's great, thank you, because I didn't know what else to say. But then he ran me through like the offer, that kind of stuff, right? And he was like, "Yeah, £72,000 a year. That's broken up through your base, a bonus that can be performative, and also restricted stock units. This and that. When would you like your start date to be? That kind of stuff." So this was like the best news I ever had, because essentially this was in the middle of my studies in final year, and I didn't have to worry about, a graduate position or anything like that, because I already had that lined up. So all I did was focus on some exams that I had to finish off, and then that was pretty much everything. I finished off those exams. I finished off my full university computer science degree. I then got given my grade. It was a first class. I think it was like 84 or 87%, something like that. And I then went straight into working at Apple as an engineer. Now, there was a bit of a buffer period between me graduating and me starting, and I won't get into this video. I think it needs a whole separate video to kind of go through the context and nuances. But there was within that portion, within that buffer period, I did become homeless. I had nowhere to sleep, nowhere to go. So I was sleeping on my mum's sofa for a period of time. And then that was hurting my back. That was giving me some back problems. So I had to sleep on the floor. And it wasn't a great part of my life, but I was just kind of, just thinking like, this offers, I'm going to start Apple soon, and then I can actually get my own apartment, which is of course the one that you see here right now. But I'll get into that in a completely separate video. It's quite personal, but I don't mind showing that. But yeah, for now, let's just kind of keep it on the story into tech. So yeah, I then started the graduate position, and it felt like it was Christmas Day when I started. I started on like 4th of September 2022, something like that. And it felt like it was Christmas Day, because everybody was welcoming me, shaking my hand. They gave me a brand new MacBook, like M3 chip or whatever it was, right? Like the one that's like 3-4 grand. And it was like 16-inch screen or whatever it was. I can't remember the specs, but it genuinely was like incredible. And it felt like when I was unboxing it, it felt like Christmas Day. When you're like taking off the wrapping paper, it felt exactly like that. So that was incredible. And a lot of it was, really good learning in terms of kind of ramping up in terms of that role. Of course, it was a graduate position. So I had like less than 6 months experience prior to that, maybe 8 at a push if you include the Apple internship, but nothing really in corporate, nothing really actually in tech. So it kind of was a bit nerve wracking, and there was a bit of a learning curve as well. But I joined in, so I was there for 2 roles. The first one I had was incident response. The second one was vulnerability response. So I did those 2, and it was part of the rotation program. So I started off in one, incident response. The graduate program allowed me to move into vulnerability response, and I did that as my second one, then came off of the program. Now, I came off of the program because I graduated, and after you graduate, you get given a promotion from entry level to mid level engineer. So I went from entry level, and I was on £72,000 a year total compensation, to go into mid level on £94,000 a year total comp. So that allowed me to have a really nice pay increase and pay bump of about £20,000 more or less, purely just based on me completing that program and me doing well in it, and delivering on my projects and that kind of stuff. So that's essentially how I managed to go into that position. And then from there, I then got headhunted out of Apple from a recruiter, a technical recruiter from Amazon. So they reached out to me and they said, like, "Look, we want you in this team. How much do you want?" Pretty much. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. JD, all of that. We went through all of that. Then they asked how much I wanted. I said how much I wanted. And then, yeah, we just kind of went through like the interview stages, that kind of stuff. So in terms of the interview stages at Amazon, it was much more rigorous than the ones I had for Apple. I had for Amazon, for this technical role in tech that I had 5 interviews spread across 2 days, and that was the only availability that they had. So I had to do 5 interviews in 2 days, and you can imagine the fatigue you will get from that, even just technically, when you're on like Zoom with people and you're literally just answering technical questions non-stop for like 2 days straight, pretty much. Because some of the interviews were like an hour and a half each. Now, I had like a few different coding ones as well. But yeah, overall, it does depend on the role that you go for, plus the company, plus the team. So I won't get into the specifics, but it was very rigorous. And I kind of waited to hear back, right? Because at the end of the day, if nothing came back, I'm still in Apple. I can just keep being here, learning more, that kind of stuff. But the offer came through, right? So I hopped on the call with the recruiter. They're like, "Congratulations, you've now got the Amazon offer," right? And it felt very similar to the Apple offer that I originally got as well. And they said to me, "Yeah, so we're going to be offering you like 97K, something like that." And I was like, okay, well, at the moment I'm on 94K, so it wouldn't really make sense for me to leave for like a 3K bonus, or like an increase. So I guess like, could we kind of have that conversation? Can we kind of, and I did like some negotiating tactics and some strategies to kind of get the ball rolling for that. I managed to go from 94K, which was the original offer they gave me, to 111K by negotiating through the strategies that I know. And that allowed me to, of course, secure £111,000 a year at 23 years old in Amazon after Apple. And that was more than enough for me to say, you know what, with the career progression, with the work that I'll be doing, with the team that I'll be working on, and the culture of the team as well, everything is in alignment. Plus, of course, the comp, this looks great, right? The scope of the work was much larger than Apple as well, which means that I can learn more. So overall, it made complete sense for me to take it. So I took it, and I went for Amazon, right? And I was in that team, I was in that position, and overall, it was practically the same as Apple, in terms of like day one, unboxing, learning the ropes, understanding like the tools and that kind of stuff as well. But overall, like, it's just very interesting, right? Because you have periods, and I'm pretty sure other people get this as well. You have periods in your life where you reflect back on the decisions that you took, the outcomes that you got as well, and it just is quite phenomenal. And I still kind of kick myself to this day about it. Because honestly, my role, even at like 16, 17, when we just discussed that at the start of this video, it was only to work in tech for cybersecurity, which is my niche. And that was it. I had no aspirations for like, landing big, amazing offers or getting really good salary. I just wanted to do what I loved. And it's still true to this day, to be honest. And it's just kind of insane to see that I got to this position, right? Where it's like Apple, Amazon, and so forth. But with Amazon, it's completely, I said it's quite similar to Apple, but it's also very different in many other ways as well. So, for example, when I went there, I went into the office and it literally is like a full blown office of everything. They have, I heard they had a cinema. I never saw it, but they said that they had a cinema. They had crazy golf. They had free food and free drink to an extent, depending on the channels that you join. They also had, what else? They had canteens, they had terraces, they had motivational and inspirational art on the walls. They had sleeping pods, they had meditation rooms, they had co working spaces, they had like communal kitchens, one for each floor. They had everything you could possibly want. Oh, they had ping pong as well. So you know it's big tech when they have a ping pong table or foosball, which they also had as well. So yeah, overall, it was literally the dream, right? And it's really interesting, right? Because when you look at like America, for example, um, Fang has that for pretty much all of the offices. In the UK, it's not really the case, except with Amazon. Amazon is like that one where you have all of those things you could possibly want to actually make the work like and life kind of enjoyable there, and kind of like merge work and lifestyle kind of into one, right? So like, for example, if you do a lot of work, you do like a 4 hour coding block, you can just go and do ping pong with your manager, right? Or you can go do, foosball or crazy golf with your colleagues. So it was that kind of lifestyle, and it was like really interesting kind of see that, because I've never seen that before outside of day in the life videos, which is very interesting to me. But yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now. And that was my whole entire story, from having the initial passion at 15 years old and my friend giving me a Linux USB, to going into Apple and Amazon at 23 years old as an engineer on money that is just like, top 1% earners, that kind of stuff. And it's just crazy in terms of that duration from like 15 to 23, how much your life can change if you genuinely know what you're doing and you focus on the right things as well. And this was all down to like pretty much like the marketing, right? I mentioned like the marketing a bit in this video earlier. Essentially, if I didn't know how to be hired, if I didn't know how to pass interviews, if I didn't know how to even get the interviews or offers, or in the Amazon case, negotiate those offers to get ridiculously more compensation than I was previously awarded, then I wouldn't have ever been in the position that I am into today. And that's something that I actually coach people for, right? That's what currently my students are deploying, the same strategies to get the ideal roles in tech that they're wanting as well. And if you want to hear more about how I can help you further and potentially working with you to be able to help you land your ideal role, then what I'll do is I'll pop a link in the top of the description where you'll be able to book in a one-to-one complimentary call with me, where we'll be able to go over your current situation, any sort of bottlenecks that you're currently facing, such as rejections and ghostings, how to fix those, and what it would be like if we was to work together and if it would be a good fit to do so. So if you want to get that booked in, then you can do that with me and we can discuss that help. But yeah, overall, that was my entire story from start to finish in terms of where I started to the ideal position I'm into today. So if you genuinely stick with something for the long term and you focus on the right things, the right strategies to stand out and market yourself as a candidate correctly to actually get the interviews and offers, then you can actually be in a very similar position to myself or for your ideal role, of course, as well. But that's everything for this video. So I'll see you in the next video.